Now, it'd be extremely unfair to state that each and every one of these very much evident blunders completely takes you out of the entire, sometimes iconic, cinematic experience. However, there's still no denying that once you do spot the following glaring continuity mistakes, your days of innocently overlooking them whenever you return for a rewatch will be well and truly over. So I am Gareth here from Whatculture.com, and here are movie mistakes you can never unsee. An Apple Watch pops up before its release, fighting with my family. As fun as it was for any WWE fan to take in the real-life story of Paige on the big screen, it was still pretty hard to get through 2019's enjoyable Fighting with My Family ride without spotting the numerous weird ways the flick altered history. For example, during Paige's eventual big showdown with AJ Lee towards the end of the movie, the entire Raw stage and ring design and even the company logo are the ones that were used a few years on from that iconic 2014 in-ring moment. However, there was another far less obvious error that popped up during that aforementioned climactic championship-winning conclusion that just about everyone watching on likely missed. With the production showing up at a WWE Raw taping in February 2017 to shoot the match between Florence Pugh's Paige and Zelina Vega's Lee, which explains why the updated stage was bizarrely present during Paige's big moment set 3 years earlier, someone clearly felt it would be a good idea to use footage of someone in the crowd gasping at a superplex whilst wearing an Apple Watch. Said tech wasn't actually officially released until April 2015, meaning that either this woman was a damn time traveler, or someone clearly wasn't worried about anachronisms when piecing together this fighting climax. Dr. Hammond's magical towel, Jurassic Park. That's right, not only was Dr. John Hammond responsible for bringing dinosaurs back to life, he was also a part-time magician. Keep a close eye on the towel Hammond can be seen using when he's drying off a glass during his chats with Alan Grant and Ellie Sattler early on in Jurassic Park. As the InGen CEO lets the two know about his exciting island, the towel he's seen using on said glass is very much white, while Steven Spielberg kept everyone in a wide shot. However, when the shot then switches to one focusing on Hammond, he's magically found rubbing the cup with the same pink towel he was holding a bottle of champagne in earlier. Rather than being another Hammond miracle though, this was likely just a case of the classic film's continuity person being too busy admiring the great Richard Attenborough's mesmerizing performance to catch this quick mistake. And they weren't the only one, to be fair, with the majority of Jurassic lovers no doubt failing to catch this strange towel switch after spending many an afternoon watching the dino thriller. That's a cowboy pirate. Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl. With so many folks working their asses off screen in order to ensure each and every moment on camera looks and sounds exactly how their director wants it to, a few crew members accidentally popping into frame on occasion is about as inevitable as Captain Jack Sparrow downing a bottle of rum. And what do you know? After managing to get through an entire feature without even one rogue part of the filmmaking crew unintentionally wiggling into a scene, the very last scene of Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl contained one hilarious cameo. After Jack demands his crew of pirate lads and lasses to get back to work late on, one of said scabrous dogs suddenly rushing to their post only went and revealed what looked like a strange cowboy pirate enjoying the ocean view. Gore Verbinski did his best to divert attention away from the accidental appearance by swiftly cutting to a shot of more pirates banging into one another on the ship. But once you spot the Pearl's unexpected cowboy crew member over Johnny Depp's shoulder, it's pretty difficult to unsee them. A blood squib can be seen clearly during a murder. Heat. An awful lot of blood is shed throughout Michael Mann's gripping 1995 crime thriller Heat. And if you ever wanted to know exactly how the visual of a character being violently gunned down is achieved during the making of this sort of bloody drama, then a blink and you'll miss it flaw in this particular flick had an answer for you. As Robert De Niro's Neil McCauley closes in on William Fichtner's Roger Van Zant casually watching TV at home, focus on his leg in the wake of a few bullets being pumped into his torso by the professional thief. There you'll spot what appears to be a blood squib cord going up his pants as he tumbles over a table, with this practical effect likely triggered by the person on the end of said cord bursting some fake blood packets as the actor is pretend blasted during the sequence. And just like that, you'll never be able to rewatch this shocking and rather brutal death without your eyes being drawn to that just about noticeable wire of fake death. Did you spot Toni Collette's wig lace? Hereditary. The majority of movie fans likely spent the duration of Ari Aster's unsettling 2018 slice of horror known as Hereditary hiding behind their popcorn. I know I did. So it makes sense that most folks weren't quick to spot one rather tiny mistake on show during this tale of a family being terrorized by a demonic entity. As Toni Collette's Annie Graham works on one of her miniatures about halfway through the flick, a close-up of the grieving mother here reveals a pretty remarkable detail. Though you'd never know from looking at her character's authentic-looking hair throughout the picture, Collette was actually seemingly wearing a wig, with the piece's lace being just about visible in the top corner of the frame as she works on a bedroom. As noted by one Reddit user on a Movie Mistakes post about the floor, this sort of lace would usually be covered by makeup, but with Annie not exactly wearing a ton of the stuff during the flick, covering her in foundation may have likely seemed a bit strange for this particular shot. And though the call was probably made to simply get rid of it in post, someone clearly forgot. And now you will never forget this mistake if you choose to put yourself through the horror again. Brad Pitt's teleporting cigarette, Babylon. This list has already covered time-traveling watches and magically changing towels, but it's now time to focus on an object that appears to bizarrely teleport in between shots during last year's Babylon. After being brought home by Manny in the wake of a particularly chaotic party, a smashed Jack Conrad chooses to fire up a cigarette whilst belting out some operatic notes. As you do. But if you watch that smoke very closely as Brad Pitt's famous leading man of the 20s drunkenly explains to his new pal why he wanted to redefine the form, something quite peculiar goes down. Conrad's cigarette is very much sat in his mouth as he takes his clothes out of Manny's hands and dumps them on the floor to talk about the average person heading off to the cinema. But then as the shot switches to one from behind Pitt, said ciggy randomly shows up in his left hand out of the blue. It then swiftly returns to Jack's gob as the scene cuts back to a shot of his intoxicated face. Admittedly, with this being the same flick that boasted crapping elephants and Margot Robbie taking on a snake, it's not too hard to see why most folks didn't notice this brief continuity oversight. But it will now forever be staring you in the face during your returns to this 3-hour shindig. Were they even trying to hide the camera? Bad boys. There's a random crew member inadvertently sneaking into frame for a moment, and then there's your damn cameraman and said piece of anything but inconspicuous equipment blatantly sitting in the middle of a cinematic brawl. And that's exactly what occurred during 1983's crime drama Bad Boys, as Sean Penn's Mick O'Brien collided with Jose Morales' Paco Moreno towards the end of the flick, with the team seemingly trying to capture the pair's gritty slugfest from two different angles at the same time. A quick pause of the violence as the lads attempt to grab a nearby shiv reveals an absolutely unforgivable error. Instead of trying to disguise the fact they were using two cameras at the same time to capture this bloody battle, one of said operators is blatantly visible on one knee in the crowd for a few seconds. Perhaps director Rick Rosenthal just assumed folks would be too focused on all the dramatic grappling and roaring going on in the scene to spot this amusing camera cameo. However, once your eye is drawn to that piece of kit and the people carefully trying to record the mayhem, it's impossible to watch this bizarre skirmish the same way again. A sword falls out before Aragorn and co go and look for their friends, the Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers. You'd like to think that the mighty riders of Rohan knew a thing or two about how to properly store their equipment when riding into battle against various orcs, goblins, and Uruk-hai. However, as revealed in a brief but still rather surreal moment during the Two Towers, it appears that even the great Éomer suffers the odd sword mishap from time to time. Not long after the exiled Rohirrim surround Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas, and eventually inform them that their hobbit pals had likely been killed recently, Éomer offers the gang a pair of horses and advises the lads to still go and look for their probably dead mates. Lovely stuff. And it's during this somewhat gloomy moment that the Horsemaster's blade appears to gradually slip out of its scabbard as the camera cuts to a concerned looking rightful king of Gondor. This sort of sudden blunder is incredibly easy to miss even on the biggest of screens, with the camera operator doing their best to move rapidly up to Karl Urban's face before the blade fully slips out of its sheath. But even before then, it's painfully clear and difficult to unsee, once you take the time to focus on his weapon, that the sword was strangely already 80% hanging out of its holder as he trotted up to the Fellowship heroes. And now you have another excuse to go and fire up the Lord of the Rings trilogy for the 300th time, folks. You are welcome.
Giant man out of nowhere. Avengers Endgame. A movie as epic as Avengers Endgame was always going to come under intense scrutiny when it hit home video platforms. And fans quickly noticed a baffling continuity error during the film's insane final action sequence. At one point, Ant-Man and the Wasp head to their van in an attempt to get the quantum tunnel operational. Yet mere seconds later, when Black Panther is shown running with the Infinity Gauntlet, Giant Man can be seen fighting a Chitauri Leviathan in the background, though it's clearly nothing more than an editing mistake. Some have tried to handwave it by suggesting that either Ant-Man teleported into the battle and back again, or more hilariously that it was actually Hank Pym fighting as Giant Man. Either way, fans kicked up enough of a stink about this error that it's tough to forget about it during repeat viewings. The visible gas canister, Gladiator. There's nothing that breaks audience immersion quite like a piece of modern technology showing up in a period movie. And despite winning 5 Oscars including Best Picture, Ridley Scott's Gladiator is guilty of an epically unforgettable gaffe. During the film's Battle of Carthage sequence, one of the chariots gets flipped over and slides along the floor. As the dust begins to clear, a metal gas canister can be blatantly seen on the back of the carriage. And given that Gladiator is set in 180 AD, it's a device which wouldn't actually be invented for, say, only about 1500 more years. Unfortunately for Scott, the film's re-releases on Blu-ray and 4K only make the mistake that much more noticeable. And hilarious as it goes. Julia Roberts' shape-shifting breakfast, Pretty Woman. This is one of the most infamous mistakes from any major Hollywood movie, and so it's one that's practically impossible to ignore. When Vivian is having breakfast with Edward in Pretty Woman, her breakfast magically transforms from a croissant into a pancake during the mere seconds where we cut between the two of them. Some fans have tried to argue that Vivian simply put the croissant down and started noshing on the pancake. But given that the pancake already has a bite taken out of it when we cut back to her, it's definitely just an editing error. Or the waiter simply took a cheeky bite out of the treat on the way over to the table. Though that seems somewhat unlikely. Preemptive bullet holes, Pulp Fiction. There are too many memorable moments in Pulp Fiction to name. But who can forget the brilliant moment where one of Brett's associates emerges from the back of the apartment, firing wildly at Jules and Vincent but missing them completely? If you're paying attention in the lead up to this moment, you may notice that the bullet holes from the man's gunshots are actually already in the wall while they're talking to Marvin, seconds before the man even takes aim. It's probably fair to assume that the original continuity of the scene was a little different, and Tarantino rejigged it during editing, hence the bullet holes being pre-lodged in the apartment wall before they're even fired. Hardly a terrible mistake, but certainly a noticeable one, and surprising given the generally exacting quality of Tarantino's filmmaking. Even the greats make a hash of things on occasion. The obviously fake baby American Sniper. Clint Eastwood's American Sniper is a sobering, brilliantly acted look at the life and times of marksman Chris Kyle. Though it very nearly derails itself midway through with one of the most infamous mistakes in any Oscar-nominated movie ever. When Chris and his wife Taya are at home, Chris tends to their newborn daughter, which is surely the most blatantly fake baby prop doll audiences have ever seen. Clips of Cooper holding this clearly lifeless plastic thing and even using his thumb to slyly move the baby's arm quickly went viral, while industry analysts wondered whether the terrible gaffe might affect American Sniper's Oscar chances. Perhaps tellingly, it won just a single of its 6 nominations. Screenwriter Jason Hall later confirmed that they had a real baby and a backup ready to go on the day of shooting, both of which fell through, prompting the famously efficient Eastwood to use a doll instead. Cooper and Miller really tried their best to sell it, but the fact that the doll doesn't even remotely move like a real baby is distracting to the point that it's near impossible to pay attention to what's actually being said during the scene. The magically repaired car, Commando. Arnold Schwarzenegger's Commando is one of the greatest guilty pleasure action flicks ever made. A testosterone-fueled barrage of ridiculous action and hysterical one-liners almost beyond compare. But its crowning achievement might well be the fact that it features a continuity error so brilliantly stupid that one almost suspects it was actually intentional. After muscled hero John Matrix runs Sully off the road, and subsequently drops him off a cliff, he steals Sully's car and drives off into the night. Except, Sully's yellow Porsche convertible has considerable damage to the driver's side as Matrix hops into it, but when he drives off in the next shot, we can see that the side is perfectly repaired. It's an especially baffling error given how easily a member of the crew should have been able to notice it. Considering that it only adds to the film's kitschy B-movie legend though, it's ultimately more of a happy accident. Worst extra ever. Quantum of Solace. One of the unsung arts of making any big movie is ensuring that the hundreds if not thousands of extras and background artists are coordinated successfully. Because if an assistant director gets it wrong, the results can be hilariously bad. Case in point, Quantum of Solace features an hysterical beat where Bond is sat on a motorcycle while staring pensively into the middle distance. And a dock worker sweeping in the background isn't actually sweeping the ground. The air sweeping has become a viral sensation in recent years, while filmmaking logic suggests that the extra was instructed not to actually sweep the floor because it would generate unwanted noise. That he was allowed to wander into frame while doing this though is absolutely absurd. All the more so given Craig's totally stoic foreground expression. Batman's disappearing eye makeup, Batman Returns. At the end of Batman Returns, the Dark Knight shows up to stop Catwoman from killing the villainous Max Schreck. At first, he appears to be kitted out in his typical Batman garb, but mere moments before he removes his cowl and reveals his true identity to Selina Kyle, the black makeup surrounding his eyes magically disappears. Presumably, this was because director Tim Burton didn't want to have Bruce Wayne trying to hold a serious conversation with Selina while sporting a pair of panda eyes. But honestly, it probably would have looked pretty creepy, which is normally right up Burton's street. At the very least, it certainly would have been less distracting than the makeup just disappearing out of nowhere. Will Smith's Johnson, Wild Wild West. And finally, we have a movie mistake that you won't be able to unsee for all kinds of reasons. When protagonist James T. West has his amorous bathing session interrupted early in the film, he stands to his feet in the buff. But due to some inattentive editing, eagle-eyed viewers are able to see a little more of West, that is Smith's body double, than expected, with an eyeful's worth of his genitals visible for a few fractions of a second. Given that this is a PG-13 movie aimed primarily at families, it's not a good look, and one that no amount of eye bleach will ever be able to fully erase.